Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that takes complex ideas from really foundational sources and, well, tries to make them usable for you, giving you that shortcut to being genuinely well-informed.
And today is a bit different, isn't it?
It is. This is a special one we're tackling listener mailbag.
Yeah.
So the mission today is digging into the toughest, most common real-world problems that you, our community, sent in.
We've got questions covering really the whole spectrum. Tricky relationship stuff, why we believe weird things sometimes, feeling stuck.
All of it. But we're not just handing out simple advice here. That's not the point.
No, absolutely not. We're treating these very common, very human problems almost like, well, scientific puzzles or philosophical ones even.
Exactly. And our sources, they're the heavy hitters. Foundational psychology, philosophy, Festinger, Freud, Pavlov, Gottman. A lot of big names.
Right. We're digging into the sort of core programming, the blueprints of human behavior to hopefully give you some really actionable knowledge, something deeper than just tips.
Yeah, the goal is to pull out that foundational wisdom, the stuff that allows for real personal understanding. Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start with the conflict that really hits closest to home for so many people. By far, I mean, it wasn't even close. The #1 question, in maybe a dozen different forms, was basically, why is it so incredibly hard to communicate with my partner? And why do we keep having the same fight over and over again?
Okay, yeah, that's a huge one. And if we really want to get why communication breaks down, we can't just say, oh, you're not listening. It goes deeper.
Deeper how?
We really have to start with attachment styles. These are like the unconscious blueprints we all carry around that dictate how we handle intimacy, how safe we feel, how we react in conflict, especially in romantic settings.
Okay, attachment styles. This is that idea, right, that how we bonded or didn't with our parents as tiny infants still shapes us as adults.
It absolutely does. It's pretty profound, actually. Researchers identify these main styles in adults: secure, anxious, and avoidant, and they predict our behavior and attitudes in really consistent ways.
Most people are secure, I gather.
Yeah, the majority fall into the secure category. But it's the dynamic, often, between the anxious and the avoidant styles that causes so much friction, so much of that repetitive fighting people asked about.
Okay.
And underpinning all of this is the idea of a secure base.
You're right, the secure base. Usually we talk about that with kids and parents. How does that work for adults in love?
Well, think about it like this. A little kid needs a parent, someone dependable nearby, so they feel brave enough to go explore the playground, right? For adults, a reliable romantic partner functions in much the same way. They become that secure base, that psychological safe harbor that allows us to, take risks out in the world, be creative, chase our dreams.
Okay, so if your relationship doesn't feel like that safe harbor, if you're always kind of second-guessing if your partner really loves you or if they'll stick around.
Exactly. Then you're not just having relationship problems. It actually makes it harder to engage confidently with everything else in your life.
Wow. So it affects work, focus.
Definitely. It's much harder to maintain focus, pursue long-term goals, tolerate uncertainty if that basic relationship security feels shaky. Now, let's look at how the insecure styles try to get their needs met or cope when they don't feel met.
Okay.
Take anxious attachment. These folks, they tend to carry this deep worry that their partner doesn't really love them or that they're going to leave.
And so they react by trying to get really, really close, that sort of hyper-closeness, wanting to merge completely.
That's often it, yeah. An intense desire for connection. But that intensity, that neediness, can sometimes feel, well, suffocating to the partner.
And that pushes them away.
It can, yeah. Which ironically creates the very abandonment the anxious person fears most. It's a painful cycle. The research mentioned Suzanne, who really craved closeness but kept getting hurt because her approach, her intensity actually drove partners away. That intense desire for union becomes almost like a protest against any perceived distance.
Okay, so that's the anxious side. What about the avoidance style? They don't protest like that, do they?
No, their strategy is different. It's more about withdrawal. They use what the researchers call deactivating strategies.
Deactivating strategies. What are those exactly?
They're basically unconscious trips the mind plays to turn off the attachment system when intimacy starts to feel too intense, too close for comfort.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, a classic one is the chilling effect. You're dating someone, it's going great, maybe getting serious, and then suddenly you start noticing all these tiny irritating flaws in them. the way they eat, maybe they breathe weirdly or blow their nose in an annoying way.
Huh, okay. Little things become huge annoyances.
Exactly. You start feeling suffocated, and focusing on those flaws creates emotional distance. It deactivates the closeness.
Or the Phantom X, right? They keep up to.
Yeah, the Phantom X. That's another powerful one. You fixate on an idealized memory of a past partner, maybe someone you can't even get back together with, but thinking about them constantly serves as a perfect psychological block. By comparing the current, real partner unfavorably to this perfect ghost from the past, you keep emotional intimacy at bay. It justifies not getting too close.
Wow, that's effective. And unconscious, you're saying.
Largely unconscious, yeah. And it really highlights how these styles have fundamentally different, often clashing needs for intimacy versus autonomy. And the research is clear. These differences are incredibly hard to bridge if both people don't understand why they're acting out these old patterns.
Which brings us back to communication. Because understanding is one thing, but talking about it. You said earlier it's not a no-brainer, that secure people are just better at it.
It really seems that way. Studies show securely attached folks handle conflict communication more effectively. Why? Well, partly because they don't get flooded by strong emotions quite so easily.
They can stay calmer.
They can stay calmer, articulate their needs more clearly, and crucially, they operate from this underlying belief that they are worthy of love and that their partner is generally responsive and well-intentioned.
That belief must be powerful. You called them effective communication coaches.
Yeah, in a way, because they expect positive responses, they tend to draw more open, constructive communication from their partners. But if you're insecure, the moment conflict arises, you might get overwhelmed, maybe lash out, or fall back on those protest behaviors or deactivating strategies we talked about.
Like in that case study, Rebecca and Tom.
Exactly. Let's look at that. So Rebecca feels lonely, disconnected. It's been a stressful week. Tom's been busy. She really wants connection, so she insists they visit her sister on Saturday.
Okay, seeking closeness.
Right. But Tom is wiped out. He needs downtime, space, rest. So he digs in his heels, says he needs to stay home.
So a classic clash of needs. Intimacy versus autonomy.
Precisely. But because Rebecca feels insecure and denied, she doesn't just accept his need for rest. She pushes. She interprets his withdrawal as him not caring, as rejection.
And Tom?
He feels pressured, maybe criticized, so he clams up even more, withdraws further. Then she calls him selfish, and boom, silence, isolation. Nobody's needs get met, and the distance grows.
Ouch. Yeah, that shows perfectly how a simple difference in needs spirals when insecurity leads to attacks and withdrawal.
It's a textbook example.
So, okay, disagreements, even screaming matches are going to happen. You're saying even happy couples have them. So what is the secret sauce then? It's not about solving every single problem.
Absolutely not. And that's such a liberating insight for people, I think. Successful conflict resolution isn't the magic key. Happy couples often have the same recurring perpetual arguments for years.
Really? The same arguments?
Often, yes, about the same core differences. The real danger isn't the fight itself. It's when the fight leads to this long-term feeling of emotional disengagement, feeling ignored, taken for granted.
Or when stress from outside the relationship, like work stress, constantly spills over and poisons things.
Exactly. That spillover effect is huge. So if conflict isn't the main problem, what predicts success is the ability to repair the connection after a fight.
Repair attempts. Tell us about those.
In happy relationships, partners are pretty good at sending and receiving what relationship researcher John Gottman calls repair attempts. These are like the brakes on the negativity spiral.
Like what? What counts as a repair attempt?
Oh, it could be anything. A joke in the middle of tension, saying, "I'm sorry," softening your tone, touching your partner's arm, saying something like, "Hey, wait, can we take a breath for a second?"
Simple stuff, right?
It can be very simple. But in unhappy marriages, even really well-phrased, heartfelt repair attempts often just fail. They don't land. The other partner is too caught up in their own hurt or anger or defensiveness to even hear it.
So the key skill isn't avoiding fights. It's learning to spot and accept those bids for connection, those repair attempts, even when you're upset.
That's a huge part of it. Really focusing intensely on hearing them and accepting them. And alongside that, we have to tackle this mental trap we fall into during conflict.
Which is?
The fundamental attribution error. Sounds technical, but it's something we all do.
Explain that one.
It's our tendency, especially when we're upset, to believe the fight is entirely the other person's fault. That their behavior stems from some fundamental flaw in their character. They're selfish, they're lazy, they're inconsiderate.
And we ignore maybe situational factors or our own contribution.
Precisely. We forget that our reality, our experience of the fight, is subjective. Their perspective might be totally different, and neither perspective is necessarily the objective truth of what happened emotionally.
So to break that negative loop.
Both people have to be willing to own some piece of it, how or small. Okay, maybe I was being overly sensitive, or yeah, I have been really critical lately, or I guess I haven't really shared what's bothering me. Just admitting some role.
That takes humility when you're feeling wronged.
It does. And finally, related to that is the absolute necessity of forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Why is that so critical?
Because holding on to grudges, nursing resentment from past fights, the sources call it a heavy burden, and it truly is. If you're constantly bringing up old hurts, that weight just drags the relationship down.
So forgiveness isn't just letting the other person off the hook.
Not at all. It's also about freeing yourself from carrying that toxic resentment. You have to be willing to let go of past injuries for the relationship to actually move forward in a healthy way.
Okay, that really covers a lot about the intimate relationship challenges. The next big cluster of questions we got from the mailbag shifted focus a bit, more towards the public sphere, I guess. People asking, why do other people, or maybe even myself, believe things that just fly in the face of facts? And why is it so darn hard to change anyone's mind?
Ah, yes. The stubbornness of belief. This takes us right into the fascinating world of cognitive biases, the ways our minds are kind of pre-programmed to, well, not always see reality clearly.
An essential engine behind this, you mentioned, is Leon Festinger's big idea, cognitive dissonance.
That's right. Cognitive dissonance. It's a powerful concept.
Okay, break it down simply for us. What is it?
At its core, cognitive dissonance is that uncomfortable feeling, that mental stress you get when you hold two conflicting beliefs, values, or ideas at the same time. Or maybe when your behavior clashes with one of your core beliefs.
A classic example being smoking.
The classic example. You smoke, that's the behavior, but you also know factually that smoking causes cancer. That's the conflicting belief or information. That mismatch creates an unpleasant tension dissonance.
And our first instinct when we feel that tension is just avoid the thing causing it.
Pretty much. Avoidance is key. You're likely to dodge articles about smoking risks, maybe downplay the statistics, or just try not to think about it. Reject the dissonant information.
But Festinger's theory suggests we don't just stop at avoidance, do we?
No, we get more active than that. We actively engage in what he called self-selection in media audiences.
Meaning we seek out stuff that confirms what we already think.
Exactly. We look for news sources, articles, friends, online groups, whatever, that specifically align with and validate our existing beliefs. We build ourselves a comfortable information bubble.
So we're not just passive victims of misinformation. We're active architects of our own echo chambers.
That's a good way to put it. We curate our reality. And this whole process gets massively amplified by our social circles.
How do groups play into this?
Well, groups are crucial. On the one hand, they can expose us to different views, which might increase dissonance initially, but more often perhaps they provide a strong source of supportive views that help us resolve dissonance by conforming to the group norm.
So peer pressure is partly about reducing that uncomfortable feeling of being different.
It seems so. The research showed, for instance, that students who were really well integrated into campus groups were much more likely to shift their personal opinions to align with the group consensus, specifically to reduce that dissonance.
It's a powerful drive to belong, psychologically. And you mentioned this can even escalate to something called mass proselyting.
Yes, that is a fascinating observation in Festinger's work. When a group holds a very strong belief, maybe like a prophecy predicting a specific event, and then that event fails to happen.
That creates massive dissonance. Their core belief just crashed into reality.
Huge dissonance. Now, logically, you might expect them to disband or admit they were wrong, but sometimes the exact opposite happens. The intense need to resolve that dissonance drives them to double down. They start trying vigorously to convert new members to their belief.
Why? To convince themselves?
Essentially, yes. By persuading others, they seek external validation for their own now shaky belief system. If they can make more people believe it, it feels more real, more valid, reducing their internal conflict. They need social proof.
Wow. Okay, so that's the big picture of belief. But moving down to everyday life, the questions we got about, say, financial decisions or consumer choices really highlight how predictably irrational we are.
Yes. Predictably irrational, that phrase, popularized by Dan O'Reilly, is perfect. Traditional economics used to assume we're all these hyper-rational calculators making optimal choices.
But we're not.
We're absolutely not. Behavioral economics shows we have systematic biases, we mess up in the same ways over and over again. It's predictable.
Let's talk about one of the most famous biases, the endowment effect.
Oh, the endowment effect is a great one. The classic study involved Duke University students and highly sought-after basketball tickets. Some students won tickets in a lottery.
Lucky them.
Indeed. But here's the thing. Once they owned the tickets, they suddenly valued them way, way higher, something like 14 times higher, than students who didn't win were willing to pay for them.
Just because they possessed them, even though the actual experience of the game would be the same.
Exactly. Mere ownership drastically inflated the perceived value. Rationally, the ticket's value should be based on the game experience, but psychologically, the pain of losing something you own feels much stronger than the pleasure of gaining something equivalent, like the cash offer.
So possession isn't just 9/10 of the law, it's 9/10 of the perceived value, too.
Pretty much. And this bias affects so much how we sell our houses, why we hang on to clutter, why we stick with investments that aren't performing. It's tied into that sunk cost fallacy, too. We overvalue things just because we've already put time or money or effort into them.
That's a really practical thing to watch out for in yourself, isn't it? Am I holding on to this because it's actually valuable, or just because it's mine and I hate the thought of losing it?
It's a constant battle. And it's not just about valuing objects. This irrationality extends to our own ethics, specifically around honesty.
How so?
We seem to be incredibly good at rationalizing small acts of dishonesty, especially when money isn't directly involved. When it's about non-monetary things, it's like there's a psychological loophole.
Like taking a few pens or a notepad from the office supply closet.
Exactly. Or grabbing that can of soda from the communal fridge at work, you might rationalize it. Oh, I worked late, or everyone does it, or it's basically part of my compensation. Because it's not cold, hard cash, it feels less like stealing.
The abstraction makes it easier to swallow, ethically.
It seems so. It allows us to maintain our self-image as a generally good, honest person, while still benefiting from, well, minor cheating. As long as the currency isn't directly dollars and cents, our internal moral calculator gets a bit fuzzy.
And this fuzziness even affects how we feel physically. You mentioned the placebo effect and cost.
Yes, the power of price perception.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Cost can literally change how effective we believe a treatment is. There was an experiment with a fake painkiller called Velladone RX.
Okay.
Participants were given this pill. Some were told it was expensive, like $2.50 a dose. Others were told it was cheap, maybe 10 cents a dose. It was the exact same sugar pill for everyone.
And the results?
The people who thought they were taking the expensive pill reported significantly more pain relief than those who thought they took the cheap one.
Wow. Just the price tag changed the placebo effect.
Powerfully. The expectation created by the higher cost literally made them feel better. Our minds are suggestible in predictable ways.
Okay, so our minds are wrestling with dissonance, falling for ownership biases, rationalizing little cheats, and getting swayed by price tags. How on earth do we make good choices, especially when we're drowning in options? Which leads us to maximizers versus satisficers.
Right. The paradox of choice. Modern life bombards us with options, hundreds of shampoos, endless streaming choices, countless investment funds, and this abundance, counterintuitively, often makes us less happy with our choices.
Why? Because the pressure is higher.
Exactly. When you only have 2 choices, you pick one, maybe shrug, and move on. But when you have 50 choices, the pressure mounts to find the absolute best one, and the responsibility for making the right choice feels heavier.
And that pressure defines the maximizer.
Yes. The maximizer is someone who is driven to find the very best possible option. They'll spend ages researching, comparing features, reading every review, trying to optimize every single decision.
So it's exhausting.
It is. And here's the kicker. The research shows that even when maximizers do find objectively better outcomes, maybe they get a slightly higher salary or a better product, they tend to feel less satisfied with their choice.
Less satisfied. Why?
Because they're constantly plagued by the what-ifs. What about the options they didn't explore? Could they have done even better? They're haunted by opportunity costs and second-guessing. They experience more regret.
So what's the alternative? The satisficer?
The satisficer, this term comes from Herbert Simon. Satisficers don't aim for the absolute best. They have a standard, a set of criteria for what's good enough.
Okay.
They search for options, and as soon as they find one that meets their good enough standard, they stop searching and they choose it.
And they're happier.
Generally, yes. They spend less time and energy agonizing over choices. They're less likely to regret their decisions because they weren't aiming for some mythical perfection. Being a satisficer frees up huge amounts of mental bandwidth.
So the practical advice is, try to be more of a satisficer, at least for less important decisions.
Absolutely. We need to rely on habits, routines, simple rules of thumb, or just accepting good enough for many choices, otherwise we drown. This lets us save or maximizing energy for the decisions that truly warrant it.
It's about becoming a conscious chooser instead of just a passive picker.
Exactly. When you're overwhelmed by options, you often just end up picking something almost randomly. A chooser reflects. How important is this decision? Is good enough okay here? Can I create a new option, or can I just rely on a habit or a simple rule?
Like setting a rule for investing. I'll choose any index fund with fees below X% instead of trying to find the absolute single best fund in the entire market.
Precisely. Set a clear, good enough standard, meet it, and move on. It conserves that precious cognitive energy.
All right, we've hit relationships and biased beliefs. The next really big theme that came through in the listener questions was about feeling stuck, overwhelmed, and searching for purpose. Questions like, how do I get unstuck? How do I find meaning when things feel pointless or just overwhelming?
Yeah, the quest for meaning and how to handle suffering. This takes us into some really foundational territory, thinking about happiness itself. Freud, for instance, had some interesting reflections on this.
Freud on happiness, what did he say?
Well, he observed that just going after unrestricted pleasure, trying to satisfy every single need instantly, seems like the most obvious path to happiness at first.
Makes sense. Do what feels good.
Right. But he argued that path quickly leads to its own punishment. Constantly choosing immediate gratification over caution often results in a pretty significant pain down the line.
So we naturally start looking for ways to avoid suffering, maybe even more than chasing pure pleasure.
Exactly. Avoiding suffering becomes a primary goal. And Freud outlined a few common strategies people use. One he called deliberate isolation.
Isolation as a path to happiness.
In a sense, it means keeping people at arm's length emotionally. This protects you from the inevitable pain and complications that come with intense relationships. The happiness you get is one of peace, quiet, solitude.
A retreat. Okay.
What else? Another path, maybe more constructive for some, is sublimation.
Sublimation. That's channeling, drives into something else.
Yes, exactly. Displacing the aims of our basic drives onto activities where they can't be easily frustrated by the outside world. Think of the deep pleasure an artist gets from creating, or a scientist gets from solving a really tough problem.
So the satisfaction comes from inside, from the mental or creative work itself.
Right. If your main source of joy comes from your own mind's activity, then external misfortunes have less power to hurt you. You achieve a kind of mastery over your inner state.
That sounds ideal.
It does, but Freud added a crucial caveat. This path isn't easily accessible to everyone. It tends to require special talents or intellectual gifts. Most people can't find all their life's satisfaction solely in highly specialized work like that.
All right. So if we shift gears from Freud to someone like B.F. Skinner, the behaviorist, he talked about motivation in a different way, right?
Right.
Aversive control versus positive reinforcement.
Yes, Skinner drew a sharp line there, and it's really relevant to feeling stuck or motivating ourselves.
How does that distinction help us?
Well, aversive control is when you're motivated by trying to avoid something bad. Think of a slave working only to escape punishment, or maybe someone sticking to a miserable job just because they fear unemployment. The feeling is one of escaping, maybe even wanting to attack the source of control.
Okay, motivation by fear or threat.
Right. Non-aversive measures, on the other hand, use positive reinforcement rewards. Think of wage systems, or praising a child for good behavior instead of just punishing bad behavior.
And Skinner argued positive reinforcement is more powerful.
Acquired more slowly, perhaps, but ultimately much more powerful and sustainable. In the aversive system, freedom means escaping the controller. In a positive reinforcement system, the motivation comes from the anticipated reward, the positive outcome itself. It feels fundamentally different.
Which connects really nicely to our internal mindset, doesn't it? How we frame challenges. Carol Dweck's work on fixed versus growth mindset seems key here for getting unstuck.
Absolutely crucial. Dweck found that when people face setbacks or shortcomings, they tend to fall into one of two camps.
The fixed mindset camp.
They believe their qualities, like intelligence or talent, are fixed traits. So their main goal is to prove they're smart or talented. When they fail, it feels like a devastating judgment on their core self. So they might avoid challenges or try to create a world where they simply don't have shortcomings.
Like that example of Lee Iacocca later in his career.
Exactly. The research suggested he started surrounding himself only with people who agreed with him, pushing away critics. He became a non-learner because he couldn't face information that challenged his fixed view of his own genius.
And the growth mindset.
People with a growth mindset believe abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. So when they encounter failure, they don't see it as proof they're inadequate. They see it as an opportunity to learn, to grow, to get better.
Like Dargan Smith, the CEO who turned Kimberly-Clark around, he was known for confronting brutal facts.
Yes, confronting shortcomings head-on is characteristic of the growth mindset. And this starts really early. Dweck found that kids with a growth mindset, when their parents got upset about a mistake, tended to interpret it as, Mom and Dad want to help me figure out how to do this better next time.
They saw it as teaching, not just judgment.
Precisely, not a judgment of their fundamental character. And this outlook directly fuels what Martin Seligman called learned optimism.
Learned optimism. How does mindset affect optimism?
It's about how you explain things to yourself, your explanatory style. Optimistic people tend to explain good events using permanent, pervasive causes. I succeeded because I'm talented, or I worked really hard.
They take credit, basically.
They internalize it as part of who they are. Pessimists, even when they succeed, often attribute it to temporary specific causes. Oh, I got lucky that time, or the task was easy. They don't integrate the success into their self-concept.
And the reverse for bad events.
Exactly. Pessimists explain bad events with permanent, pervasive causes. I'm stupid. Things always go wrong for me. While optimists see them as temporary setbacks. I didn't prepare enough this time. That was just bad luck.
The good news, though, is that this isn't fixed. You can learn optimism.
That's the powerful message from Seligman's work. Pessimistic thinking patterns and rumination can be changed, often permanently, using techniques derived from cognitive therapy. You can learn skills to challenge negative self-talk and bounce back from defeat more effectively.
Which seems essential for finding meaning, especially when facing real hardship.
Yeah.
This brings us to Viktor Frankl and logotherapy.
Frankl. His insights, forged in the unimaginable suffering of Nazi concentration camps, are incredibly profound.
His core idea was finding meaning despite suffering, right?
Yes. His ultimate realization, after enduring so much, was that there was nothing left to fear in the world except his God, as he put it. It's about finding a sense of purpose that transcends your immediate circumstances, achieving what he called optimism in the midst of pain, guilt, and death.
How does logotherapy suggest we actually do that? How do we find meaning?
It's an active approach. Frankl suggested, for example, consciously recognizing the richness contained in your own past experiences. Instead of just worrying about the future, maybe review old journals or calendar pages. Look at notes about things you've done, challenges you've overcome, love you've experienced.
Acknowledging the life already lived.
Exactly. Taking pride in all the life you've already lived. It reframes your existence not just as a future to be navigated, but as a unique legacy you've already built. It grounds you in your own concrete reality.
That's a powerful reframe. But there's a potential pitfall here too, isn't there? Relying solely on achieving specific goals for meaning.
Yes, that's a really important point, highlighted by researchers like Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Action and goals are vital. They help create order in our consciousness. But if you rely only on achieving external, pragmatic goals like, I must become plant manager by age 45, that might not be enough.
Not enough to give meaning to your whole life.
Exactly. Those kinds of goals can sustain action for a while, but once achieved, they can sometimes leave you feeling empty. All the sacrifices made, the other parts of life neglected, they can come back as doubts and regrets.
Was it worth it? What did I miss?
Right. True, deep meaning usually needs to be connected to something larger than just hitting the next career milestone or financial target.
Yeah.
It needs to transcend those specific accomplishments. And that leads us perfectly into our final and maybe the most intricate set of questions from the mailbag. People asking essentially, what is physically happening inside me when I feel intensely unsafe, anxious, or even traumatized?
Okay, so we're moving beyond the psychological now, right, into the biology of survival. And the key theory here is Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory.
That's the one. It's a really groundbreaking way of understanding our autonomic nervous system, the system that controls all the stuff we don't consciously think about, like heart rate, breathing, digestion.
And Porges describes it as working in a hierarchy based on evolution.
Precisely. A phylogenetic hierarchy. Think of it as 3 layers of defense strategies our body chooses from, depending on how safe or threatened it feels. These systems developed sequentially in evolution.
Okay, what's the oldest, most basic system?
At the bottom, the most primitive layer is what Porges calls the primitive vagal system. This uses the unmyelinated vagus nerve, and we share it with ancient vertebrates like fish and amphibians.
And what does it do?
If a threat feels overwhelming, inescapable, this system kicks in. It promotes immobilization, shutdown, inhibition. Think of an animal playing dead or freezing completely. It's an extreme, metabolically costly, last resort defense, sometimes called the dorsal vagal response.
Okay, the deep freeze. What's the next layer up?
That's the sympathetic adrenal system. We share this with reptiles. This is the system everyone knows. It fuels the classic fight or flight response.
I think the accelerator.
Exactly. It ramps up heart rate, pumps out adrenaline, mobilizes energy, gets the body ready for intense physical action, fighting or running away.
And then the newest system, the one unique to mammals.
That's the ventral vagal complex, or VVC. This system uses the myelinated vagus nerve, which allows for much faster, more nuanced responses. The VVC is crucial for social behavior.
How so? What does it control?
It regulates muscles in the face and head involved in expression and vocalization. Crucially, it allows for rapid dynamic changes in heart rate, what Porges famously calls the vagal brake.
The vagal brake. I like that image. What does the brake do?
It allows our body to quickly calm down to inhibit the fight or flight response without having to fully engage the primitive shutdown system. When we feel safe, the VVC is active, applying this vagal brake. It slows the heart rate, promotes calm physiological states, and makes us receptive to social connection.
So when a baby calms down, hearing a parent's soothing voice.
That's the vagal brake in action. The loving caregiver's calm face, their gentle vocal prosody, the rhythm and tone of their voice, these are cues of safety. The infant's nervous system picks up these cues through this process Porges calls neuroception.
Neuroception like perception, but unconscious.
Exactly. It's the nervous system constantly scanning the environment below the level of conscious thought for cues of safety or danger. These cues then automatically trigger one of the three systems engaging the social VVC and its brake, mobilizing the sympathetic fight or flight, or initiating the dorsal vagal shutdown.
And our hearing plays a role here too.
A big role. The evolution of the mammalian middle ear was critical. It allowed us to fine-tune our hearing specifically to pick out the higher frequencies characteristic of mammal vocalizations like the human voice, even against a background of low-frequency noise, like a predator's growl or thunder.
So when we feel safe, our ears literally tune into connection.
That's right. The VVC actually adjusts the tension of tiny muscles in the middle ear to optimize hearing human speech frequencies when we're in that safe, socially engaged state. When we feel threatened, that tuning shifts.
Okay, fascinating biology. Now let's connect this directly back to the listener's question about trauma. How does this polyvagal framework explain what happens?
The core insight from researchers like Peter Levine building on this is that trauma isn't just the event itself. It's fundamentally the result of incomplete physiological responses getting stuck, suspended in fear.
Incomplete responses.
Meaning, when the brain's alarm system senses a major threat, it does two things. It partially shuts down the higher thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, and it floods the body with massive energy via the sympathetic system to prepare for fight or flight.
Okay, you're primed for action.
You're totally primed. But what if you can't fight back? What if you can't escape? Maybe you're physically restrained or overwhelmed, or it's a child facing an abusive adult. That huge surge of survival energy gets generated, but it has nowhere to go. It's not discharged through action.
And so it gets trapped in the body.
It gets trapped in the nervous system. And because the response cycle wasn't completed, the organism, the body and brain basically concludes it's still in danger. It doesn't get the signal that the threat is over.
Which creates that ongoing feeling of anxiety, hypervigilance, maybe flashbacks.
Exactly. It creates a self-perpetuating loop of activation. The nervous system remains stuck in high alert or cycles between high alert and shutdown, leading to debilitating symptoms.
So if the energy is trapped physically, how does healing happen?
The key insight here is that the body holds the key. Healing involves working directly with those unresolved physical sensations, the felt sense, as Eugene Gendlin called it.
The felt sense, like body awareness.
Yes, paying gentle, mindful attention to the actual physical sensations connected to the trauma, tightness, heat, trembling, numbness, without getting overwhelmed. Slowly, carefully, allowing the body the space to finally complete those interrupted defense responses, maybe through subtle movements or tears, or just allowing the energy to discharge.
And notice what you didn't say.
Yeah.
You didn't say healing requires endlessly talking about the traumatic memory.
That's a huge, often counterintuitive point. While understanding the story can be helpful, forcing yourself to repeatedly relive the traumatic memory can actually be re-traumatizing. It can just reactivate the fear cycle without allowing for a completion or discharge.
It might even interfere with healing.
It can, yeah. Because when you're in that high state of arousal, the brain functions differently. It activates this intense searching mechanism, trying to make sense of the overwhelming feelings.
And it might grab onto unrelated sensory detail.
Exactly. It might latch onto current sensory input, a sound, a smell, an image that has a similar emotional tone to the original trauma, and weave it into the memory narrative. This can create what are sometimes called experiential collages.
So the feeling is real, but the details might not be historically accurate, contributing to false memory debates.
Precisely. The intense feeling state is absolutely real and valid, but the narrative constructed around it during high arousal might not be a perfect recording. Healing focuses on resolving the physiological charge, the trapped energy, more than on achieving perfect narrative accuracy.
Okay. And finally, what about the impact of trauma, especially chronic or early trauma, on our actual sense of self?
That's another critical piece. Research using brain imaging, particularly by people like Bessel van der Kolk, shows that individuals with chronic PTSD, especially from severe early life experiences, key areas of the brain involved in self-awareness often show sharply decreased activity during trauma recall.
Which brain areas are we talking about?
Primarily the medial prefrontal cortex, which helps us monitor our internal state and relate experiences to ourselves, and the insula, which is crucial for interoception, feeling our own body from the inside.
So if those areas go offline,
It becomes incredibly difficult to register your own internal states accurately. You might feel disconnected from your body, unsure of what you're feeling, or unable to judge whether something happening around you is actually relevant or threatening to you. It's a profound loss of self-sensing.
that sounds terrifyingly disorienting. What helps bring those areas back online? What's the countermeasure?
One powerful countermeasure, emphasized by researchers like Kristen Neff, is cultivating self-compassion.
Self-compassion, how does that work?
It has three main components. First, mindfulness. Being able to turn towards your discomfort, your difficult feelings or sensations with awareness, but without getting totally swept away by them or layering on harsh judgments.
Noticing, non-judgmentally.
Yes. Second, common humanity. Recognizing that suffering, imperfection, and pain are part of being human. You're not alone in your struggles. It connects you to others rather than isolating you.
Reduces that feeling of being uniquely flawed.
Exactly. And third, kindness. Actively comforting and soothing yourself when you're in pain, just as you might comfort a friend who's suffering. Offering yourself warmth and understanding.
This isn't about letting yourself off the hook, is it? It's about resilience.
Absolutely. It's about fostering strength and resilience. Neff talks about the yin quality of tender self-compassion, simply being with your pain, holding in a loving, connected presence. That compassionate attention itself can make the pain more bearable and actually begins to transform it, helping those self-sensing brain areas to gradually reactivate and come back online. It rebuilds that internal connection. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, so we started this deep dive with some really tough practical questions that you, our listeners, sent in. And we've journeyed through some complex territory to find answers rooted deep in our biology, our social programming, our cognitive wiring.
Yeah, from the fundamental need for a secure base in our relationships.
To the cognitive biases like dissonance and the endowment effect that skew how we see facts and make choices.
The crucial psychological difference between always needing the absolute best maximizing versus finding what's good enough satisfying.
And finally, right down to the nuts and bolts, the physiological basis of trauma and safety in our own nervous systems.
It's quite a map we've covered, and if there's a common thread running through all of it, it seems to be this idea of achieving some kind of mastery.
Mastery over what?
Well, mastery over our own consciousness, maybe. Or over our behavior in the external world. Or mastery over the emotional and physical echoes of our past. That seems central to tackling these big life problems.
And achieving that mastery, it seems, often requires looking inward and maybe questioning the rules we live by. I'm thinking of Eric Berne, the transactional analysis guy.
Right. Berne argued that the goal of therapy, really the goal of growth, is to gain freedom of choice, the freedom to consciously choose your responses to things, rather than just reacting based on old programming.
And a big part of that programming is the parent data. the rules, beliefs, injunctions we absorbed, often unconsciously, from our caregivers in childhood.
Exactly. And Burns' point was powerful. You have to examine that parent data because, as he essentially paraphrased Socrates, the unexamined parent is not worth basing one's life on. It might be wrong. We have to question those deeply ingrained rules.
That internal questioning, that examination, maybe that's the real heroic adventure,
Right.
more so than external conquests. I'm reminded of Ernest Becker's work here, too.
Becker, yeah. He and many philosophical and religious traditions really argued that true healthy submission isn't about submitting to human authorities or even romantic partners completely. It's about submitting to something higher, something infinite.
Why? Why not devote yourself fully to a person or a cause?
Because, as Becker saw it, any finite human thing, a lover, a nation, a leader, even our own ego, ultimately can't bear the weight of our deepest existential needs for security and meaning. They're bound to fail us eventually.
So even the strongest person, psychologically, eventually needs to, what was the phrase, that lay the burden of his life somewhere beyond him.
Right. The burden of creating ultimate meaning and security entirely from within ourselves or finding it solely in another flawed human is just too heavy. We need to connect to something larger.
Which brings us, I think, to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on this week. If genuine mastery involves questioning our internal rules, and lasting security might require connecting to something beyond just ourselves or other people, then the question becomes, what is that highest reality, that ultimate source of meaning and security for you?
A deep question to end on. Until next time, keep digging.